Hey everyone, so this is part two of the pitfalls of pricing with contract work. So this part I'm not going to talk about the direct clients billing practices, although again this applies. So just follow along and just know the main difference again between what you do with your direct clients and what you do with contract work through other IT companies. I keep calling it B2B, but that's not like the best way to call it because your clients are usually going to be businesses anyway. But either way, so in this part, we're going to start with you always want to put in counter offers. So FieldNation and WorkMarket. And you'll be able to do the same thing if you're working directly with a company because again, you can email them. But WorkMarket and FieldNation have a function on their website for counteroffers. I want to point out that there are companies that disable the counteroffer button. So when they create work orders, they can actually just never accept counteroffers for work. And you can use your own judgment if that's going to be a problem or a red flag. So again, like there are certain companies like the company that does caption phones that's literally public funds that they accept for deploying the phones and setting those up. So they're not always able to pay you more. But yeah, so to me, I would consider a company that turns off the counteroffer button to be a red flag unless they are in fact doing something involving a government program like the caption phones for the hearing impaired. But so you always put these counteroffers in because that first offer is guaranteed to be a lowball rate. Regardless of how it appears, almost all the time, I would say 90% of the time, that company absolutely can and should pay you better than what's in that initial work order. So it's going to take time. So if you're just starting, and I can't tell you for your area, I can only talk about mine, but once you establish what a good buyer can offer in your area, you can use that as a benchmark to judge whether that company is worth taking work from. Again, a company that is really cheap, that doesn't want to pay their techs very well, isn't going to take care of you if something goes wrong very easily. They're going to care more about their back and their bottom line, and they're going to look to push as much on you as possible. So you got to be very careful versus taking work from a much more reputable company. If something goes wrong, they're going to treat you like a human being most likely. But so in my case, just for my area, I would take no less than $65 to $75 an hour for subcontract work, and no less than $250 for half a day and $500 for a full day. It is okay to make exceptions if the work is going to be long term, like if it's going to be a week-long project. Yeah, you might be reasonable to go down just under 400, like 350. I wouldn't go lower than that, but depending on the kind of work, how close, and how much you need the money, yeah, it might actually be worthwhile, and it could be a good company. So it's okay to give discounts to the right people, but it's also important to make sure that you collect travel fees. In some way, shape, or form, you have to charge. It's got to cover your time. It's got to cover your gas somehow. If it takes you an hour and a half to drive to a location, be aware that part of your service is physically getting there. When you're bidding the job, that's your opportunity and your one opportunity to say, hey, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get there. and I'm going to charge you this much for that travel. So make sure that you charge for your travel as well. And so I would use the benchmark as what would you charge per hour to do the work, because that's still your time. Just talking on the phone, providing consulting is worth hourly rates, and same way with your travel. So, and another thing is that when you're bidding jobs, especially when you're doing your counter offers, always, 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 always bill up front for 2 hours of time. So whatever your 2 hour mark is, that's what you need to quote minimum. And then you give an hourly rate after. So I'm saying this because you're going to see work order terms that are going to come at you as flat rate or blended or just straight hourly. I personally like to use a blended rate because that way I can clarify that this is going to be 2 hours upfront minimum, and after that it's your hourly rate. And so certain types of jobs should be flat rate, but most jobs should be hourly. And if you're looking for like a guideline of what to look for and what to reject and what to change the terms on, I made a little list here for you. So we're going to start with types of work that should be hourly. If it requires any sort of troubleshooting, that is an hourly job. You don't know how long it's going to take to fix it. You don't know what the problem is. You're going to be doing testing. You might have to call and talk to somebody on the phone that has information you don't have available. So troubleshooting is always going to be a hourly job. And yes, companies will try to offer flat rate work to do this, and you don't take that. Another thing that should be hourly are any sort of installation where the work is just not plug and play. Like we go back to our example of phone installations in the last video. So a company can absolutely pre-configure a phone and set it up to where it's absolutely just plug and play. Just unbox it, plug it in, make sure it still has a dial tone, whatever, and then you're good. And so again, back to that old example, $150 to install 4 of those phones that are completely plug and play is a great deal, at least around here. I'm not saying you should charge, I'm not saying that's what you should always accept. I'm just saying that in that example, that isn't a bad deal for the tech. They could absolutely be getting more, but it could absolutely be far worse. But yeah, so any installations that are not plug and play, that requires you to call a help desk for activation, especially if the work order mentions any sort of troubleshooting that might happen. There's a good reason they do. Like, you got to pay attention to the language of the work order and learn to read between the lines. I can't exactly teach you in one video how to do it, let alone this one. I can tell you experience is the best teacher there. Another thing that should be hourly, any sort of small cabling jobs. I would consider a small cabling job to be between 1 and 4 drops. That's something that you can reasonably complete in less than a day. Depending on the building, depending on the drops, but most of the jobs, especially from WorkMarket or FieldNation, that you'll have to do this, they're going to be in a retail or restaurant setting. I've not seen too many that were multi-level hotels or whatever, so you use your judgment there. If it's small, if it's multi-levels, it's definitely not a small job. So, but another thing that should be hourly, any sort of work order that requires several human interactions in order to complete, where you might have multiple check-ins and check-outs, any sort of, if you have to go through multiple site contacts that you have to call or see in person just to get to where you're supposed to go. So one of the things that I've seen over the years. It's starting to get better, but I've rolled up to a job, checked in, say on FieldNation, saw my work order, said, hey, call this help desk and to check in, and then after you're done, you need to call this other help desk to check in. And so checkout process is similar. You check out usually with both help desks, and then finally on FieldNation. All of this can take time. You will literally sit on the phone on some of these for long periods of time, and as long as I'm being paid per hour, there isn't a bad deal to just sit there and follow your work order instructions. Because honestly, you might be on the phone for 30, 40 minutes just trying to check in and check out. There's an hour right there, hour billable time, just sitting on the phone. And that's on them for being inefficient. And they will pay that. So, but yeah, so another thing that should be hourly to any sort of work that can take several hours to complete, but it isn't going to take more than a day and a half to. I say this because there are jobs that look like it might take 6 hours, ends up taking 12. And so, because a job that's 6 hours is usually billed out something that's not on a day rate, but you totally could, then you're looking at a considerable time investment. So because predetermined, because once you're on the job, you can't change the terms of the contract. Once you're already there, it's done. You just have to work with it. So this is why the flat rate isn't always like going to be available, or the hourly isn't always going to be available. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. It's really hard to change the terms. What you can do, if you absolutely get down to that point, is work up to the point that you've agreed to work, and if they're not willing to pay you more, you're not required to work more, and you can absolutely fight to get paid. But now let's talk about work that should be flat rate or used a day rate or half day rate, just depending on what it is. So my metric for determining what my flat rate is this is going to be a job that you know how long it's going to take. There shouldn't be any troubleshooting involved, and it'll make more sense as I go through this list. So most residential work, so long as it doesn't require troubleshooting, should absolutely be flat rated. The American consumer loves flat rates for things, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing for you, depending on how you utilize that. So a lot of residential work can absolutely, they'll be pre-planned and handled almost like a cookie cutter kind of job. Like if somebody's having a problem with their computer not working, you would, like in my case, I would anticipate at least 2, if not 2.5 hours on site to do that, and I would use that to establish what my flat rate is. So if I'm charging, a residential customer, we'll just go with $75 an hour, and we turn around and we know that it's going to take 2 hours to do, at most, to do this kind of job. You can flat rate it $150. And so if you can get it done a lot quicker, good on you. It's still flat rate. It's still $150 whether you're there for the full 2 hours or you're in and out in 30 minutes. So, but it works both ways. If you end up spending half the day there and it was a flat rate job, you also can't necessarily go in and, bill them for that extra time. Again, in this case, what you could do is stop the work, say, hey, so this is outside of the scope of the service you paid for. In order for me to continue to actually fix this is what it's actually going to cost. I'm going to need to, this is going to take parts, this is going to take more time, and this is going to require another visit. And so that's something that definitely comes up in residential, but you should still have the same attitude and strategy when working with commercial clients. Another work that should be flat rate, any sort of ongoing work that takes up at least 2 whole days. Like if you know that you're gonna, like if it's gonna be a two or 3 day wiring job, bill that on a flat rate. Or if it's gonna be a job that takes, yeah. So another one that takes, that should be a flat rate. Any sort of AV or home theater install or some sort of like digital signage that you would find in a commercial setting. I guess I should just say TV mounting jobs. The easiest way to call it. Any sort of TV mounting job. Again, this is a cookie cutter job. You know how many people. Sometimes you can do it alone. Sometimes it's going to take 2 people. Not a big deal. You budget all of this out. You know how long it's going to take you to do the install. I personally would budget it out for half a day. And again, so those rates that I'm talking about, I forgot to mention, are per tech. So if it takes a helper tech, he's got to charge too. So you don't necessarily, there's no rules on what you do, but at most you would charge for 2 full techs. But either way, this is going to be that's a flat rate job. There's no reason to charge hourly for that. But again, that all depends on the site survey, which should almost always be a flat rate job. I do believe that certain types of site surveys, especially if they are very deep and very thorough, collecting lots of documentation, should probably be hourly. Use your judgment. But most of the site surveys that I've done involve taking photos, taking notes. Sometimes they ask you to draw up floor plans for the place. And most of the offices that I've been in, we're talking less than 2 hours on site. So 2 hours at most. So this is another one where you could flat rate for 2 hours and be okay. I would still bank on a half-day rate because $250 for a site survey as a tech, especially when they're doing wiring stuff, is, well, anyway, use your judgment. So, especially when most people are billing, $100 or more an hour locally, directly, asking a company for $250 to do their site survey isn't a big ask. And it's worth trying for, but you'll figure it out. But yeah, so another thing that should be flat rate, and this goes back to a point earlier, but any kind of work that can be reliably completed in a predetermined amount of time, doesn't require any constant or frequent human interactions in order to complete. Like if you're flat out being asked for a 2-week project, that's when you bring in your day rates. And you say, yeah, my day rate is this. You're asking for this many days. Here's any travel cost. This is what it's going to take to get me on your job. And so those should absolutely be flat rate. At that point, if you're trying to bill per hour, you're just nickel and diming them. It sucks, because maybe you're paying an employee per hour. So and that's a whole nother dynamic if you have employees that are being paid per hour working on jobs that you're being billed flat rate. Again, that's because you have to know how long it takes to do it, and then you have to price it in a way that gives you a cushion, because maybe you're sending the new guy and it's going to take him an extra hour because he's just learning how to do this for the first time. But yeah, I guess a short summary though is any jobs that are flat rate should always be simple one and done jobs. Anytime you should always reject or counteroffer any work orders that are not being billed out appropriately. And keep in mind that any companies who blatantly require flat rates for what I would consider inappropriate types of work aren't companies that you should seek to do that much work for. And this season, I'm starting to see a lot of garbage buyers on these platforms now that are abusing these work order types, because either they're being really cheap or they don't even know what they're doing themselves. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of companies that do these things out of ignorance. They do it because they think it's the way they want to do it. They do it because to them, paying the tech a single flat rate for the job is a good deal for them, not caring if it's a good deal for the tech or not. Or they're so inexperienced that the only reason they're doing it is because they've seen other companies do it that way, and they're like, you know what, I think I can make this work for me, I'll do this too. And so you gain a whole different understanding when you're the tech and you're actually doing this. And so from my experience, these are the jobs that you need to watch out for. And but that's how you do it. That's how you build. That's how you have continued success. And those same strategies apply to your direct clients as well. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you on the next one.